What's the most satisfying act of I don't give a fuck that you have ever witnessed? My cashier in Amsterdam was literally just taking my groceries and sliding them across but not scanning them and then putting them into my bag. She scanned the last thing for like €2 and goes, "That'll be €2. She did not give even half of one fuck. Probably her last day of work. One of my high school teachers was just before retirement. I remember on the day of the final exam he handed out the test papers, then sat down at his desk and read the newspaper with it opened up all the way in front of him. He couldn't see us and vice versa. The smart girl in front finished first and just passed her paper back. It went all around the class. Not the first fuck was given by him on that day. In my history course in college, professor would give us like 10 questions a week before exam. Then on the exam he'd have 3 of those questions we had to answer in a short essay response. Everyone would just pick the 3 easiest questions from the 10, write it up and save it to their phones. Then when we had to do the exam just pull out our phones and copy it. We wouldn't even respond to the specific questions on the exam. Oh, and 10% of our grade was by attendance. He'd pass out a piece of paper and everyone write their name on it. I'd see 40 names on it, half with the same handwriting and pen, but only 15 kids in the class. That professor didn't give a fuck. Edit, he had a super thick Persian accent and very difficult to understand, for those wondering if you went to the same college I did. I have to admit that I got pretty close to doing things like that before I retired last year, especially with the required freshman classes. Most of the students were only there to fulfill the administrative requirement, not to learn anything, really. That was fine with me because it gave me more time to spend on the minority of students who actually did want to learn. Win-win. That sounds like what the professor said first day of class. Something like, "I understand most of you are here because it's a requirement and don't have much interest in world history. That's fine." Back when I worked at a movie theater, one of my fellow assistant managers, Jack, had the constant attitude of not giving a fuck. He'd worked at the theater longer than anyone and was good friends with the general manager, so he got away with murder. One time this lady wanted a refund for a movie she'd finished watching. She was going crazy, screaming at us about how the movie was so inappropriate to be rated PG-13 and she couldn't stand all the swearing in a movie. I kept calmly trying to explain to her that since the movie was already over we couldn't give her a refund. Our policy clearly stated no refunds after 30 minutes into showtime. She's not hearing it, and looks to Jack now, like he will give her the answer she wants. He starts saying the same thing I did, and she interrupts him again with her yelling about how she couldn't stand all the swearing in the film. Jack rolls his eyes and just says, "Well, that's just too fucking bad," and walks off. Cue stunned look on my face and the ladies. Are you sure you didn't work at my theater? Because this sounds exactly like something I would do. I had a woman demand that I give her free popcorn because she had to wait in line. There were literally 3 people in line and it was right after we opened, so we only had one concessionist working. The woman waited less than 5 minutes. She came up and started yelling how it was ridiculous how she had to wait in line just for popcorn, so her popcorn should be free for the inconvenience. I laughed at her and said, "Yay, that's absurd. I'm not doing that. Your total is 6.30. She didn't buy popcorn and told me she was calling corporate. I gave them their number and wrote down my name for her. I'm not going to be bullied by a 55-year-old woman. Work in Geek Squad. Another agent was really upset that day and had a rough patch of a few clients who were really mean and extremely rude to him. After bearing through them and after about a 10-minute break he helped another client. Their first words were, "All right. Best Buy gave me a shit product that broke after 6 months and I want you to fix it right now," which he explained that there's a process and he couldn't fix it right now, and the guy cut him off and said, "I don't care, get it done." Well, he sat there for a second quiet, and took off his badge, slapped it on the table, yelled "fuck you," then started walking towards the front door with middle fingers up pointing at everyone, then said "and fuck this place," and walked out. When I went home and on Steam I saw he bought GTA 5, He then hit 200 hours played in 2 weeks after that, haven't checked since. One casual employee decided to stop using proper radio procedure. Instead of using his correct call sign, he replied on the radio with Super John Smith, not his real name. He kept doing it all night despite dispatchers, supervisors and coworkers telling him to stop. He still works there and has outlasted hundreds of employees. I'd say his work-life balance is pretty good. I still call him Super John to this day. Super John Smith. This is John Smith actual. How copy. I thought I would see more call center stories here. Not barred us, but it's at least one for the headsetters amongst us. About 10 years ago, I was struggling to find a decent job out of high school during the Great Recession. Desperate for work and with my first kid on the way, I begrudgingly began working at an AFNI call center in Tucson. About a month into being on the floor taking real calls, I realized I needed to get serious about college, and my last weeks on the job were spent crediting sometimes hundreds of dollars. Biggest credit handed out was $1,100 to people that were polite and may have been mildly inconvenienced. I spent hours helping one lonely elderly lady after another. These were landline Verizon customers, through non-related tech support, life issues. You'd be surprised how many people use customer support numbers in hopes of finding someone to talk to about their day. In this sea of mostly pleasant, polite Midwestern ladies was an absolute witch calling about a $5 charge that I was always happy to credit people for. Before I could even help her, she starts berating me, cussing me out and telling me how much Verizon sucks, the lawsuits ... etc. This was getting into my last week on the job, and I calmly say, "Ma'am, you are way out of line and need to get control of yourself. I'm going to place you in a 1-minute timeout, and we will try this again." I place her on hold, and the couple of guys around me are cracking up at what they just heard. I figured she hung up while we're all laughing and celebrating my accomplishment, and turned to see 2 minutes later that she's still on the line. I figured she was really going to lose her shit now. I take a deep breath and with a satisfied grin on my face, open the line back up and say, "All right ma'am, are we good to proceed?" To my absolute shock, she says, "I'm sorry about that, I'm stressing out about a bunch of other things and this phone bill sent me over the edge." I credit the account, ask if there's anything else I can do, and finish the call as if nothing happened. That exchange taught me a lot when it comes to dealing with people losing their tempers. If you can just put a few extra seconds of time between the moment a person is enraged and the next interaction, you'll often encounter something resembling a reasonable human being. I was training a new bartender at this fairly upmarket restaurant nightclub. She'd previously worked at a dive bar for students. Second night into her training, the 2-foot-long rubber shots mat with the Red Bull logo on it disappeared off the top of the bar. My trainee went around the other side of the bar to look for it, thinking it had fallen off. Next thing I know, she's pulled it out of the back of a dude's pants and slapped it back on the bar. She then grabbed him by the upper arm, spun him around so that he was bent over the bar and spanked him on his bum. I mean really walloped him while telling him off loudly for being a stupid shithead. And then she returned to the bar and washed her hands to get the stupid off of her. I think I'm in love with her already. Worked a shitty fast food job when I was 15. Girl I worked with got fired. The manager was a real witch, says to her as she's escorting her out of the building that she needs to return her work shirt cleaned. Girl whipped it right off and threw it at her, walked out to her car in her black bra and drove off. Damn, I wish I'd got her number. Who returns shirts? My work has it in our contract we have to literally cut them up when we quit. If they don't fit anymore, they don't want them. But we can't donate them or throw them out whole. Little bit late, but at Air Force basic training when you first show up you're either in civilian clothes or the uniform with sneakers, because they don't want to fuck up your feet I guess, and are affectionately called sneaker weakers. While at chow if the table behind you gets up, You need to get up and leave regardless if you're finished. If 2 tables behind you get up, you'll be swarmed by empty eyes and have them scream in your face until you do get up. I had just put my tray back and started to walk out when I look back and see one lone sneaker weaker by himself in a row of 5 or 6 tables, surrounded by 6 empty eyes. Kid is staring straight ahead and just eating his food 1 spoonful at a time while the empty eyes scream in his face. Finishes his food, sets his spoon down, picks up his drink and just slowly finishes his water, turns his glass over, puts it down, picks up his tray and walks up to put it away while still being screamed at by 6 empty eyes. Kid is walking out and I realize everyone in the room is staring at him. He has no emotion, no fear, no smirk, nothing as he walks out of the chow hall. Sounds like that kid had some training at home before getting to basic. I loved Navy boot camp because my parents raised us like we were in the military. The RDCs scream and yell and torment and torture and belittle, and I'd be trying to hide a smirk thinking that they could learn a thing or two from my parents.